Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. 400 people in Russia. Obviously, this country is very different. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
Go on.
Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
Really? What sort of things get you
Well,
arrested?
one example I give in my show is there was a young woman from Liverpool called Chelsea Russell, and people can look this up. Her friend was killed in a car crash, a 19-year-old woman, and she posted the lyrics of his favorite song on her Instagram, the lyrics. And there was a rap song, so the lyrics contained several instances of the N-word. Okay? She was arrested, prosecuted, found guilty, given 500 hours of community service and a fine, tagged, and for a year she was under 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. curfew.
My goodness.
In Britain.
In Britain.
In 2018.
So we talk about the Chinese system of social credits.
Right.
And describe it as the creation of, or the emerging of, a digital prison. But we're doing it to ourselves voluntarily in the West, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean,
so we'll cancel people socially if they say the wrong thing on social media. But you're telling me now that 3,500 people were visited by the police.
No, far more were visited by the police. Right. Far more. There are cases just half a year ago, and I defended Jo Brand, a British comedian, over this. She made some comments, which, you know, it wasn't a great joke, but she talked about this during this milkshaking episodes where people were having milkshakes thrown at them. She said that, well, if I was doing it, I'd throw some acid over them. Right. That's not a great joke. But she got a visit from the police on the basis that she was, quote, inciting violence. And they eventually decided not to proceed with prosecution. But it was obviously a joke. She's a comedian. She was on a comedy program. The context is very clear, right? The defining case actually in recent British history on this was the Count Dankula incident. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
No.
This is a Scottish YouTuber who made. Okay, so this is quite an interesting one to explain. His girlfriend had a pug dog. You know those little ugly dogs?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm going to get in trouble
you'll
now.
Be in trouble.
Yeah,
you can expect a call. You've offended pug dogs.
Exactly. And she thought it was the cutest thing in the world. Yeah. And he wanted to annoy her for a prank. So he trained the dog to be the most horrific thing that he could think of, which in this case was a Nazi. So he trained this dog to do a Nazi salute. Right? He posted it on YouTube to his 3 subscribers at the time. And overnight, the video went completely viral. 3 million views in like a week. He was arrested, convicted, found guilty, fined £800. And he is, to this day...
What precisely was the charge?
It was hate speech.
Hate speech?
Hate speech, yeah. It was grossly offensive. He was being grossly offensive. That's the correct legal terminology. And he to this day is a hate criminal. When the papers write about him, they're legally allowed to call him a Nazi hate criminal.
Wow.
That is where we are. And it really started with that. I talk about all of these things in my show, where we are now in a position where in that court case, the prosecutor argued that context and intent are irrelevant. And the judge accepted this.
Really?
So even by retelling the story to you now, I am potentially engaging in grossly offensive behavior. Context and intent, according to these people, are irrelevant. Now, get your mind around that and think about the potential implications of that.
Well, it's extraordinary.
That is where we are. It's funny, like I said, we were chatting before, I think we started, I was having dinner with a friend from Saudi Arabia about this. And I told her, and she couldn't believe it. You know, so what does that say about us? Do you know what I mean? And she was like, really? In Britain? But isn't this a free country? That is where we are. And that's why, as I say, we have to push back against it and go back to what are fundamental values of civilization, John? What are they? Freedom of speech, freedom of association, as you said, right? And respect for the individual and the rights of the individual. That's not to say that community isn't important, but there's a level of rights that we all have.
With the rise of so-called non-crime hate incidents, arrests over grossly offensive memes, and the government's online safety bill threatening to clamp down on social media posts, can you really speak your mind in 21st century Britain? To find out, I spoke to Harry Miller, a former police officer who has had several run-ins with the law over supposedly offensive online posts. Harry Miller, your name has become synonymous with people who have been dealt with the police because of their offensive tweeting. Can you explain to viewers exactly what's happened to you recently and also in the past in your relationship with the police?
They came to me because I tweeted about gender-critical content. I'd famously retweeted what they described as a limerick. It wasn't a limerick, it was a piece of feminist doggerel. Nevertheless, somebody, don't know who they were, they decided that this had caused them great offence, and they contacted Humberside Police, and Humberside Police then contacted me. Essentially what they said was that even though I'd committed no crime, if I continued not committing crime, that could in some weird way escalate to crime. When the police come against you because you have said something that is controversial, or because some trans person somewhere decided that they didn't like it, that when they take that trans person's moan seriously and they come and try and censor you, that is entirely illegal. And Mr. Justice Knowles equated it to the Gestapo and the Stasi.
For arresting people over their tweets. I went to Lincoln's Inn to speak to Dr. Anna Lutfi, an equality and human rights barrister, to understand the law around freedom of speech and how it's under threat. So what actually is a non-crime hate incident?
That's an excellent question, Stephen, and I think it's one that you should ask Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, because I don't think anyone knows by this stage. We have College of Policing website, and Google non-crime hate incidents in the search engine. You'll find what purports to be a definition, but I mean, good luck with that. You could be a PhD in linguistics and make no sense of it. It's utterly incoherent. It's basically the idea that if somebody finds something offensive and they report it to the police as such, then that person hasn't committed a criminal offence, but they've committed a non-crime incident which has some consequences akin to having committed a criminal offence. Basically, in Orwellian terms, a non-crime crime. Will it be recorded against your name? That would be at the arbitrary discretion of the police officer involved. Will it show up on a DBS check? It might not. Is it something that's likely to affect you negatively in your career as you apply for jobs? Possibly. These are all questions that go unanswered, and they very much rest on the individual case-by-case basis, which is not, as you may well appreciate, the basis for a sound democratic legal system. We are now living in a society where using social media puts you automatically at risk. A total, again, Wild West scenario where human rights are what anybody says, and it's just a question of whether an arbitrary decision maker will act in your favour or not.
The Online Safety Bill will affect freedom of speech in a couple of different ways. First of all, it creates some new criminal offences, some new speech offences to do with harmful communications. Now,
do you think that we have free speech in the UK?
It's a great question, because I suppose the answer is we have free speech as long as we don't want to say anything that's going to be too controversial or offensive. And that's technically not how the law should work. There's a long-standing case law from the European Court of Human Rights that says even, or perhaps especially, speech that is offensive or distasteful is protected speech. But in practice, we have so many laws on our books to do with hate crimes, inciting racial hatred and religious hatred, all of these kinds of speech offences. And actually in quite a sort of nannying moralistic way as well, where people are prosecuted for making mean jokes. Should it be illegal? Should people get a criminal record for making distasteful jokes?
As more people are questioned by the police over their online comments, pressure is only rising not to share controversial opinions.